Cognition, I told you.
I know. I think, yeah, I need to hire you to help me with this stuff. Hey everyone, this is McLean Warren with Rise and Shine. I'm here with Brendan Fields, who owns Rebate. And we're really excited today because we have a special guest, Kelly Painter. I'm gonna let Kelly kind of introduce himself and talk a little bit about your background, and then we'll dive into, why you're here and all the information you can give our audience that they can apply to on their daily routine. So Kelly, take it away.
All right. My name is Kelly Painter. The name of my company is Be Healthy, Happy, and Fit. Personal trainer, as well as an online health and fitness coach. I've been a trainer for 27 years and really have had an evolution of my philosophies on health and fitness. Initially very exercise pro and still am, but also had to evolve that idea. Because, one of the things that I see with clients of mine when they come in is that they think they're going to exercise their problems away. And that's just not the case. There's many areas of health and fitness that affect each other. And if they all aren't addressed to some degree, you're going to be limited in any results you're going to produce from exercise. And the 5 pillars of health that I really focus on with clients are exercise and activity, diet, sleep, which is a huge one that people skip, especially people in the business world think they're just going to push all-nighters all the time and perform, and it's just not the case. As well as breath, which might be a unique one, and mindset. So,
breath?
Yeah.
You did?
Breathing.
Oh, I was going with like a bad breath or something like that. Gotcha.
Well, that probably, maybe in the COVID it's okay with the online, but yeah, bad breath is not good either.
I was like, this is really fascinating. You're really going stretching.
Yeah. I don't know how much on this, an hour really isn't a lot of time to get into obviously all of those categories, but I kind of wanted to, I'll take questions obviously from you, but talk about a few areas and ideas people might be able to take on themselves right away. Because obviously when I get to know a client, there's specific things to them that might be unique to them. But there's definitely across the board some things that show up with most people that are having issues and or just want better health and fitness. Okay. So one that I want to talk about is the idea of diet, which is a big one. Because there's a lot. Over the years, personally, I'm dating way back to the zone diets and all of these ones I'm going to mention have some aspect that is good. However, I think it's evolving in a more healthier and better philosophy all around. I think it's a very confusing aspect of diet. Because I went from zone diet to even played around with Atkins, which I don't necessarily encourage people to do, vegan, pescatarian, keto, carnivore. Carnivore is more the new one. I think even when I mentioned it to you, McLean, you weren't even aware of that, but that's going to be one of the next bigger waves that is happening. It's kind of a anti-plant-based diet, which sounds totally counterintuitive, but when you really dive deep into it, it makes a lot of sense. So a lot of my philosophies, though, are rooted in also I should have added in paleos in there too. And that's going to go into kind of what I discuss now, is that looking at our ancestors. So obviously we have a very unique situation happening in the last few years, technology booming, our lifestyles are changing, and I think that can be very positive in a lot of ways if utilized properly. However, if you look at us as a species, we've been evolving for millions of years. And for millions of those years was essentially how we produce the body we have today. So we're not going to evolve overnight to all these extreme changes. So we need to honor our ancestors and what they did, and how can we apply that to a modern lifestyle, which I think is really the key here. One of the ideas obviously is diet. So there's a lot of, and I really want to anytime I'm in something, if you guys have questions, please stop me and go into it, because I'm going to throw a lot of ideas out there and you might want more detail on certain points. But the first one being diet. Now, what there's a big push for now, which I think has good intention, but I think it's lacking a lot of research to show that it's even good for us, which is plant-based. So, and taking away the side that some people may, for ethical reasons, want to be plant-based, I totally respect that, and I'm not saying don't be a vegan and don't do that for those reasons. But I would say probably the majority of us are doing it thinking we're going to optimize our health and weight loss. If that being one thing I like to say about fat, when someone has too much fat in their body, that's really a side effect of an unhealthy lifestyle. I don't see that as a goal. The goal being live a healthy lifestyle and you won't store as much body fat, as opposed to just making that the goal. It just happens naturally when you're healthy.
Yeah.
So if you look at our ancestors, the belief is, and I believe in this theory, that our evolution as far as our cognition happened because we started to eat animals. And it had to do with a higher level of omega-3 fatty acids, which caused our brain evolution, which is why they believe we started to evolve, beyond apes and other, maybe not all animals, maybe dolphins are a little more cognitive than we don't know, but probably are. So I don't like to take away the idea of no meat. Now, when I was a vegan personally, I would totally say that I wasn't as educated as you could be. I think you probably can be healthy and vegan. It's just very tough. Meaning there's aspects in a vegan diet that you are just not going to get, B vitamins being one. Healthy omega-3s, and I maybe could talk a little bit about that, which are essential. We have to take in omega-3 fatty acids, and plant sources definitely are not the best sources for that. Most of us know that like fish oils are good, which obviously is not a vegan product, but also grass-fed beef also has a good quality of omega-3 fatty acids as well. So I think personally, and there's a lot of research to show this, the reason why meat products get a bad name is because of the way that we raise the animals and slaughter them and feed them. Essentially, that I think is horrendous. And I can understand why someone would not want to contribute to that in our society. But the issue being the way we feed these animals, meaning farm raised and feeding them grain, which is not their diet, just like it is not meant to be our diet, breeds an unhealthy animal, and then we're eating an unhealthy animal. And that's where a lot of the negative components can happen when you start consuming animal products, meaning you want to get healthier animals, which in the case of like red meat would be grass-fed beef, wild-caught salmon, which you still have to watch it with fish because of mercury levels. So I wouldn't suggest, that's another thing with becoming a pescatarian. They have very dangerously high levels of mercury over time when you just rely on that source. Feeding chickens grain as well. They're omnivores like us. They naturally would eat insects, worms, which makes them healthier. So if you were going to go eggs, I definitely recommend organic pasture-raised eggs. The challenge you get when you get into these type of animal products is that they're a little bit more expensive. There are ways to find them less expensive. I mean, even places like Aldi now sells grass-fed beef. That's where we get ours. It's a little bit cheaper than some of like Whole Foods.
By the way,
Whole Foods.
Whole Foods is sponsoring this video.
What?
I said Aldi nor Whole Foods is sponsoring this video.
We'll have made it, McLean. When we're getting sponsors like those, then we really made it, right?
I know, right? When Whole Foods calls and they're like, I saw that episode. I hear.
Aldi's is one of the places I really encourage people to start shopping. You have to pick and choose there, but it's owned by Trader Joe's, or I would say Aldi owns Trader Joe's, so they're very similar in a lot of ways. They have a lot of good products there when you eat through them. So this idea of plant-based, that's one issue, is that there's certain things you cannot get quality sources from a vegetarian diet. So a lot of people that start off doing vegan, for instance, is they do have some health benefits. It's definitely better than the American standard diet. So when they make that change, they start having a lot less toxins in their system. They probably lower their cholesterol, which you have to watch that as well. That's another controversial thing, that people think cholesterol is bad. It is not. It is the basis of how we make hormones in our body. So if your cholesterol is too low, you're going to have hormonal imbalances. In fact, I got to watch going off on tangents, because cholesterol is one that I could spend an hour on cholesterol. I'm just trying to give you kind of some base ideas, and then you guys can throw some questions at me.
So just a quick question I had, Kelly, if I can interject. So I guess you've sort of made the distinction between vegan and vegetarian and pescatarian, but like the question that came to mind, you mentioned mercury with a pescatarian diet as being one of the pitfalls of only eating fish as your source of omega-3s and other proteins. Other than mercury, since I guess mercury levels vary quite a bit amongst species of fish, is there any other downside to mostly or wholly getting those omega-3s from fish versus chicken and beef and other animal products?
Sure. Well, I wouldn't say it's a negative in comparison to red meat. Would be there's not as much certain nutrients for sure, but one of the main ones being amino acids. And there's a different amino acid construct within a bean, a fish, a chicken, and red meat. So you're definitely going to get more of the essential amino acids. It'd be very hard to get enough to really live. I mean, you could live on a pescatarian diet. I'm not saying that, but I like to think more in optimizing. How do I optimize my genetics? How do I optimize my ancestral DNA? And definitely it's been shown that to build muscle, which I'll explain why I think that's essential, especially as we age, it's much more effective to get the amino acids levels you want from red meat. You'd have to consume a lot more fish. And I'm not sure on the one-to-one numbers, it would depend on the fish, to be able to produce that essential amino acid base you really need to build muscle. And that's something that is an issue as we age. It's called sarcopenia. A lot of older people have very low levels of muscle. And this correlates to weakened bones. So the body's intelligent. It's not going to keep on muscle or keep essentially building muscle without making the bones more dense to handle the load. Except maybe in the case of like steroids, that's obviously unnatural. People take steroids, and that's why they break bones. Their muscles get so much stronger than their structure can actually tolerate. But in a natural case, you want to make sure you're getting these essential amino acids, and red meat is just a far better source. And then people usually talk about how, vitamins and nutrients are much, much better from a plant source. This is where it gets a little dicey, because some people don't want to eat organ meat. However, organ meat is extremely healthy. And that's where, if you didn't want to eat organ meat, you can buy powdered versions of organ meat. It's a lot more bioavailable than in most plant sources and in the higher volumes, especially B vitamins, which are essential. You got to take those in. And this whole idea kind of goes in line with our ancestor, that we're omnivores, so we can do both. And there are some positive aspects, obviously, to plants. So I'm not a full-on carnivore. I do have some vegetables. However, our ancestors would have always chosen an animal source first. I believe, as most do, that we evolved to the ability to consume both, but more out of survival than optimization. So there is, and you can easily find this online if you start researching vegans or vegetarians that have gone carnivore because of long-term hormonal issues they start to have and imbalances. I mean, I tried to be a vegetarian, a vegan, and it just I felt lighter. I felt like maybe more energy, but strength was so low and focus was so low. I found that for me personally, obviously I'm talking about, I just couldn't, I actually got too light, too and that's the way I've described it, is I just felt like I didn't have energy. I had cognitive energy, but when I would go try to physically, like I play sports, I play tennis, used to wrestle in college, and I just didn't have that sustainable fitness aspect. I didn't like that. And like I said, again, there's this idea about cholesterol. People sometimes go vegan because they want to lower cholesterol, because there's a lot of research to show it will lower cholesterol. Cholesterol in and of itself is not dangerous. It's actually essential. You want to make sure your HDLs are high and your triglycerides are low. And you also want to make sure that in your LDLs, that the low dense particles are low. So you could have, like I've seen some carnivores that have cholesterol in the 500s, but they have no dense particles. The dense particles are what block arteries. So that's something to understand, is that if you have high cholesterol, you should right away get a density test, because you may have healthy high cholesterol, which sounds totally counterintuitive because we hear all the time, you got to lower your cholesterol, you got to lower your cholesterol. But it's the backbone of creating hormones. So you're going to get hormonal imbalances if your cholesterol is too low. And most vegetarians do have issues with their hormones in the long run. And that's what usually causes them over years to start changing back over to maybe not being a full-on carnivore, that's extreme, but adding back in some animal sources. I'm personally, I call carnivore light and keto. So that's another conversation if you want to get into keto.
Well, I had a question.
More questions.
You get into all that. I'm just curious because you keep talking about like our ancestors and their DNA, right? And what we're supposed to consume. So if that was the case during like the caveman era, are you saying that we have not evolved in a way that makes it so we're supposed to consume plant products?
Well, I don't want to say we can consume them. I mean, it'll sustain life. You know, that's really what we're talking about, survival. They didn't always make a kill or be able to fish and find animal sources. So they had to find other ways, which obviously nuts, people know. In certain seasons, depending upon what your ancestry is, you might have consumed fruit. So, and then I can talk, this will bleed into keto, because we'll talk about how fat being a better energy source than carbohydrates and why, majority of the time. So we have the ability to sustain life, but one of the other issues that we talk about with moving more vegetable based is we start increasing an omega-3 fatty acid called linoleic acid, which is like in seed oils. You know, they call them vegetable oils, you know, and most people know that vegetable oil and corn oil is not good for us, but they don't realize that sunflower oil is not good for us. Safflower oil is not good. Canola oil is not good. Grapeseed is not good. And avocado oil is probably okay. And some olive oil is good. I mean, there's some definite health benefits to that. But if you look at a lot of the industrialized products right now, they use canola oil a lot, for instance, or sunflower stuff. Definitely if you look at chips, right? Even if you go healthy at Whole Foods, you'll find some good ones use coconut oil, which is a vegetable, technically a vegan oil that I think is good and has a lot of benefit to it. One main reason why the linoleic acid is low. So this is I'm gonna start explaining the plant part, which gets kind of extreme. But so all living species want to survive and procreate, right? It's all embedded in us. So animals have the ability through survival, through defending themselves, with teeth, with claws, or the ability to run. That's how they survive, right? Because if you're an animal, most animals are are prey to somebody. Not all, but most are. So how they survive is being able to move, whether that means fighting or whether that means running. Now, plants are no different than any other living being. They want to survive and procreate. So one way that they do that is through their seeds, right? So I would say if there's anything to avoid in your diet on the vegan side, the main thing would be any kind of seeds. They're definitely toxic. I mean, we know that apple seeds, for interest, they have arson in them. They're very toxic because that's the way they procreate. They don't want you to eat that, so they have pesticides and toxins in there. Now, there's a lot of theories about fruit. Why fruit is so colorful is because it wants animals to eat the fruit but leave the seed, which means more growth. You know, when the seeds are left astrew, more trees grow up, more plants grow up. So there's a little trick they play. But then when you talk about, like, caffeine's a great one. Everybody loves coffee, right? Everybody, and if they don't love coffee, they probably love tea, and probably for the caffeine, all right? Because that nice little most people function because of that, which is a whole other thing I'll talk about when we talk about sleep. There's toxic components in all plant products. They're natural pesticides because they don't want certain aspects of them to be eaten. So when you're talking about coffee beans, the beans themselves have toxins in them. And then unfortunately, when they roast them, there's a neurotoxic chemical in there. God, I forget the name of it. Like acrylamide. And in this case, I know I'm jumping around, but in this case, in California, which is obviously very stringent in a lot of their rules with food, they had a case from 2017 to 2020, which just got changed. They had to post at Starbucks, at 7-Eleven, wherever they sold coffee, that there was a neurotoxic chemical in their coffee,
Really?
which is in all coffee. It's in all coffee.
No,
Is
but
It's a carcinogen, I thought, right? Isn't that why California posted the warning about it? It's carcinogenic.
Yeah, it's a neurotoxin in this case, and that's the issue with it, is that it potentially can cause neuro damage. Now, in small amounts, will it do it? No, but people drink coffee every day, a few times a day, usually, like coffee drinkers, right? And it's actually, I think it's even higher in decaffeinated coffee. So, which I don't understand why they would drink decaffeinated coffee, but I get it. Some people like the taste. I get it. I like the caffeine. So that would be for me personally. And also, there's acids in coffee. That's why cold brew is a little bit better, because it doesn't heat the bean to extract the caffeine out. So I'd always recommend, if you are going to do coffee, do cold brews. You can heat the cold brew up, but you want to brew it in a cold way first. So all of these plants have toxins in them. Now, small amounts of these toxins can actually be beneficial, as long as it doesn't exceed our toxicity level. The question being is, what is that? And what is that level in each plant? I don't know that I know that. So if I do any vegetables, it's very small amount. Meaning, for some reason, for me personally, I have Crohn's and colitis in my family, and a little bit of plant fiber seems to do very well in my gut. And when I don't have it, I don't feel as good. So there could be some benefit to small amounts of vegetables and plant sources. I think that's why we are omnivores. You probably can and should consume a little bit. I just think that the idea of just going completely plant-based and moving away from what, according to our ancestors and when they study their bones, that's how they can tell their diet. They were very high in animal products, and ironically had straight teeth. Most people would think that our ancestors millions of years ago had all these crooked teeth. They don't. It's because they chewed a lot. This is a whole, I will watch it because I'll go off on a tangent about that too.
got a
A
real
lot of our teeth issues. Yeah, definitely you have to reel me in. So stop me anytime if you have a question about something I've spewed out. So I don't know what these ideal levels for anybody is, and it may vary within the individual. When I'm working with somebody, I'm looking at where they're at, which is usually pretty bad in most cases, and just making slight changes. The next being more into the keto world, which just basically means, okay, so one thing to understand about macronutrients is you have fat and carbs, you could say sugar, glucose, and ketones. Those are energy sources, which we have to consume energy, otherwise we wouldn't survive. And then protein is more of a builder. It builds immune cells, it builds cells, it builds muscle, it builds the organs, so we need that builder. The question is, what's the ideal energy source? We're designed to be able to do both. That's the reason why we store body fat. That's a fat, that's an energy that we're storing. And our ancestors were storing that because food wasn't always available. So we had to survive through forced fasting. And then at times we may have come across some sugar sources like random fruit. We didn't obviously have refined sugars and all these at the time. So some of that can be good because it actually increases fat storage, which will help us when there's no food available.
Oh.
But if you look at it like an animal, I know it's not a human, but if you look like an animal like a bear, for instance, when they attack an animal and eat it, they eat the organs first, then they eat the fat, then they may consume the protein. And it's the same thing with any high-level predator. If you look at the lion, same thing. They usually leave the lean meat for the scavengers because organs, intuitively, they must have known that the organs have all the nutrients in them. They have all the vitamins they need, and then they start going out the fat is all the energy they need. And it's a much more dense energy. So meaning 1 gram of fat has 9 calories as opposed to 1 gram of carbohydrate has 4. And it's also more satiating. When we have more fat, we release a hormone called CCK, which makes us feel satisfied, which is one reason why I think people tend to like keto. The issue with keto too is doing what I call healthy keto. There's a term now, clean keto and dirty keto. So I'm not suggesting that all fats are good. You got to have healthy fats, but you want to minimize carbohydrate sources. And mainly why I think this is important for anybody, whether they're a vegetarian keto or carnivore keto or even a dirty keto, is that when you consume a lot of carbohydrates, I know you like that dirty keto.
I'm just curious what that means. I'm just excited for you to explain.
It just means like these people who like promote just eating bacon all the time.
Okay.
Like you'll see it all the time, bacon, I can eat all the bacon I want. And I mean, to think that, number one, usually most pork sources are pretty bad just because of the way they feed and treat pigs. I consume very little pork, if any. I mean, occasionally I have some bacon. I try to get as healthy as possible, and there are healthier sources. But most of the time, I mean, I don't even want to get into the disgusting behavior with slaughtering pigs and the way they feed them. It's really, really unfortunate. That's a very unhealthy meat, right? So to use that as and then also the fat on them is not very healthy because of their diet. Their diet is, they're omnivores as well, and they tend to feed them grain again, which isn't their diet, because we have this abundance of soy and corn, which creates a lot of, that's why they have to give them antibiotics, because they get sick, because they're not a healthy animal. So what happens when you consume a lot of carbohydrates, even if they're healthy carbohydrates like fruit, is that you're going to have higher levels of insulin. So the problem with this is that when insulin is a storage hormone, right? So when your blood sugar goes up, granted, it'll go up much less if it's fruit than refined sugar, because there's fiber within that plant. If you, not fruit juice, but if you eat a piece of fruit, there are some components that will slow the rise of blood sugar, which is something we definitely want to avoid. Is peaks in blood sugar is not good. When you have these rising up the blood sugar, the body sees the sugar and wants to, one, get it into the cell so we can utilize it, and any excess, it wants to get it out of the bloodstream, because we know diabetics, whether it's type 2 or type 1, they have high levels of blood sugar, which causes damage to the organs, which causes loss of limbs, because sugar present in the bloodstream for any amount of time is not good, causes damage. So once we've filled up the cells with whatever sugar that's in there, the excess goes into fat storages, right? Which is good, because it gets it out of it, and we can store and use that for later. The problem with constantly eating carbs is you have higher and higher levels of insulin. The more you release insulin, the less effective it becomes. So then the more you have to release more, and that's a storage hormone. So if you want to access your body fat, which another term for that, having too much body fat, is energy toxicity. You just have too much energy stored on your body. Your body can't get to it, even if you fasted. And this is why fasting is so tough for some people, because they're not quote unquote fat adapted, meaning they have too much insulin, a storage hormone present in their bloodstream, So then when they take away food, they should be able, just like our ancestors, just convert over to eating your body fat and not have much problem. But they do because their insulin is either high or resistant or inefficient. So they have this storage hormone that doesn't allow them to access their body fat. So this is where keto came into play. Keto actually came into play because it was actually used with kids who were having seizures and epilepsy. They found that sugar, because sugar is not the best source for the brain, which another thing we'll talk about with keto and fasting, is very good for cognition, which people may, especially in the business world, want to improve or keep their cognition high. So you won't be able to access your body fat. And obviously, if you're in a level of 30% or more, you're hitting obesity, which is causing inflammatory issues in the body, which is causing, which will accelerate the top 5 killers, heart disease, diabetes, all these, Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is even called like type 3 diabetes because it's a blood sugar issue. So how is that? I mean, is there anything there that you want to talk about? That was a lot.
I actually had a question pertaining to, because I'm sure a lot of people are thinking this in their heads, because you're talking about how plants have certain aspects, especially the outer shell is like poisonous because it's trying to protect itself. But we also know that plants offer a lot of nutrients, micronutrients.
Right.
So what do you say to someone who's thinking to themselves, okay, well, if I just ate meat, like, am I going to still be getting all of those necessary micronutrients?
Right. Well, I'll tell you, that's a good point. That's great. I would say, number one, I wouldn't say I'm an advocate for pure carnivore. There are people that I follow that are, and they make great points. Any micronutrients that you can get from plants, there's usually a better animal source. And this is what I mean. It usually means organs. So people don't want to eat organs. You can buy desiccated organs, which means they're dried out and powdered. They're more bioavailable. And this is why I definitely suggest with most clients, carnivore light, unless they're vegetarian or vegan and they just don't want to consume animal products. Then I respect that. And I just work within their, if someone doesn't want to consume an animal for, personal reasons, I'm not going to push that on them. I respect that. I understand. I even had that concern myself. That's what drove me to try to be a vegan and a vegetarian years ago. But what I'd say is that small amounts of plant could be good. I'm speaking more of like this whole plant-based movement, like having plant-based burgers, which a lot of them are made out of soy, which is not good for us. Pea protein, unfortunately, has been shown to have a lot of problems because of Roundup, the pesticide. Even in organic sources, they're finding that's in there as well. And they also lack a lot of the amino acids we need. So more so, my bigger push is more in the protein aspect. I don't think it's a good source. I know it's not a good source for protein in comparison to animal products. When you start getting into nutrients like you're talking about, yes, we can get them from plants. And I think there's probably definitely a safe level of that. I don't know what that is. And I don't know, there's been a lot of research to determine that. And if there has been, I'm sure there's a lot of controversy there as well. But what I'm saying is that they are toxic. And this will lead me into an idea that we'll start talking about stress. I think this will really, and it'll talk about what is happening with these plants. So one idea, and I forget where I heard it, is that plants are a great medicine, not a good food. Meaning they have these what are called hormetic effects. So hormesis is an idea that people don't know. A lot of people are already doing it. This idea of acute stressors to our body. So a lot of people would come with this idea that stress is bad, right? Stress isn't good, but that's not true. We thrive on acute stressors. We are killed by chronic stressors. So an acute stressor is like exercise. Exercise is meant to stress the system, to put it kind of in a safe way, feeling like it's getting harmed, so that it'll rebound and have this hormetic effect of repair and abundance, which is hormesis. So acute stressors, which a lot of these plant sources have, small amounts of caffeine have been shown to be very neurologically healthy, have a lot of benefit towards staving off Alzheimer's and dementias for sure. So it's obviously too much caffeine can kill you. So that's what I mean by chronic and acute. Small amounts, I don't know what that is. There's research to show how many milligrams of caffeine the general person would produce positive benefit for. Even nicotine has positive effects. And that's a whole nother thing I can get into, but because some people light up when I say that, but they don't realize. It's very small amounts. It does not mean smoking it. Yeah, I'm not advocating smoking it. Number one, that's obviously damaging to our lungs, carcinogenic. You're burning the plant. Also, all the drugs they put into tobacco and pesticides and addictive chemicals, those are not good. But if you look at some of our ancestors, like even the Native American, how they use tobacco, obviously they use it spiritually as well. I mean, unfortunately, most of the times they smoked it as well. But there are sources of clean nicotine that can be very beneficial neurologically, and also even in my case, Crohn's and colitis. It has a lot of good responses to the vagal nerve system in the bowel movements and good gut bacteria. However, nicotine's very addictive, just like caffeine. So you got to be very careful. But I'm not promoting that. So my point being is that you want to apply. We're not sponsored by Marlboro here. The idea being that acute stressors are very good for our system. Like chronic stress, like being worried all the time. Obviously, I mean, an extreme example of someone you know has passed away or someone's going through a divorce. You can usually look at that person and see that they're getting damaged by the amount of worry and stress that they're applying. That is what's harmful. And that's what definitely, if you're talking about, if people we're speaking to here are business people, you want to find ways to minimize chronic stress, but you want to add in acute stressors. Ice cold shower, great acute stressor. Sauna, heat exposure at high levels for a short period of time, which is hard to get now because COVID has shut down all the saunas. Ironically, there's no way a COVID virus could live in a sauna, but that heat's too much, but whatever. This is really good for your immune system, really good for the brain, really good for muscle development. It increases growth hormone. But obviously, if you go beyond a certain amount of time with those stressors, it would kill you too. Ice baths are great, but 10 minutes, 2 hours to kill you. Same thing in these plant sources. That's why I say they're good medicine. There's amounts that can be very beneficial in producing this healthy stress response. So that'd be another thing that I always talk about, scheduling discomfort in your day. And what does that look like? That looks like brief, intense exercise. Brief being the word there, because people tend to think more is better, and it's not when it comes to exercise. If anybody that watches this wants to look up some, people have probably heard of high intensity interval training. Tabata is a form of it, for instance. Nitrous oxide workouts are another one people could look up by Dr. Bush. These are 3-4 minute routines, no more than that, at a high intensity, and then back off. People who say they have a long, hard workout or long, intense workout are wrong. You cannot have a long, intense workout. You can have a long, grueling workout, but there's a reason why there isn't a 2-mile sprint. You cannot keep that intensity at very long. And these high stressors, even with people you might think, and it's all relative. So if someone is unhealthy, a high stressor might be getting their heart rate up to 150. Or somebody who's healthy, it might be getting up over 200. So it's all relative. But whatever it is for you is going to trigger the body to have the adaptive mechanism. So I'm very big on, I call micro workouts, high intensity micro workouts, maybe 1 or 2 a day, depending upon the person's health.
Just to be clear,
any questions?
Just to be clear for people watching this, when you say do high intensity interval training or just stress your system each day, like what does that look like? You're not essentially telling people to substitute that with actual long activities such as like running or other fitness regimens, right? You're saying that you need to have both to be healthy, or no?
I would not say you need both. I would say that long duration, well, I'd say this, I'll be really clear. If you want to be a good runner, you need to run. So, like I play tennis, for instance, right?
Mhm.
And I even tell a lot of my clients, I play more tennis than I should to have optimal health. I know some people won't necessarily look at running like a sport. They tend to look at it as an exercise. There's very little benefit from long distance, quote unquote, cardiovascular activities. They're more, and we can talk about burning calories too, which is a great conversation too. But I feel like I'm doing all the talking though. I'm just covering it so well. You guys don't have any questions, right? This is a tricky one. Yeah, there's a lot of research to show there's very little benefit to long distance activities like aerobic activity, which by definition means a longer activity with a lower intensity. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to sustain it. So I would say that if you're looking at the average person or people that, you're talking about business owners that unfortunately, and probably in most cases, are sitting down a lot, sitting in front of a computer and not moving. Like even me right now, I'm standing. I use a standing desk when I do my calls. I sometimes sit when I'm writing, but majority of the time I'm standing. Mm-hmm. So that's why I said one of the pillars that I focus on is exercise / activity. So you want to be in movement during the day. Most people that I know that run are usually trying to counteract being very sedentary, right? Not always, but in most cases, there are people that sit around all day. And there's probably many studies that would go the other way as well, but there was a great study I saw where they took Tabata, which is a 4-minute routine, 20 seconds, all out, whatever the activity is, 10-second rest, and you do that 8 times. And that ends up being 4 minutes. This was designed by a Japanese doctor. And they did this study where they did Tabata. I want to say it was twice a day. It could have only been once a day. I'm not sure on the actuality. And they took the other people that would do a half an hour to an hour of cardiovascular activity anytime they wanted to in their day. It was random whether they did it morning, afternoon, or evening. And I forget all the biomarkers they took, but definitely cardiovascular efficiency was one of them, definitely strength. All of the markers were better with people, and it was 5 days a week of this for all of them. All the markers were better for the people who just did this high intensity Tabata, all of them. Even the ones you'd associate ultimately with cardiovascular and aerobic exercise as being the only way to produce these, which is not true. And I forget the actual, so it was an hour of cardio because it was 5 hours a week for 8 weeks. So they did 40 hours of work in that 8 weeks, as opposed, and it was once a week. So I remember the numbers now. So it was and the other group did 20 minutes a week times 8, 160 minutes as opposed to 40 hours, and they produced better results. Oh. So if you're talking, now if you enjoy running, that's a different thing. That's why I tell people I play a lot more tennis than I quote unquote should for optimal health because I enjoy it. There is a cost to that, meaning like there's overuse in any sport. You run a lot, you're overusing the joints. It's thousands of repetitions. You can cause a lot of problems in your knees, hips, and ankles. It also is a high level of stress on the body with very little return. So when you're talking about people or business people, unless they enjoy running, they probably don't have a lot of time. So if you can show that there's 4 minutes you can produce, granted it's a challenging 4 minutes, but it's only 4 minutes, you don't really have the excuse, I don't have the time, and you're going to produce better results. Really then it just becomes, are they willing to do it or not? And that still is a challenge with some of my clients that I coach online, because most people that come to a coach, there's a reason why they're coming to a coach. They're not doing it themselves, or they don't know what to do. And in most cases, I would unfortunately say most people don't know that they don't know what to do. They're looking at very old paradigms of more is better. Aerobic is essential. You got to have aerobic and strength training, and that's just not the case. And most of the cardiovascular issues people are having are because of their diet, and they're not going to counteract that through activity. If people are worried about heart disease and all these other things.
Well, that's
one thing to go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, for a lot of us who, are entrepreneurs, running businesses and stuff, it's really hard to get time in to, like you said, do an hour or hour and a half of exercise. So it's kind of nice to hear that you can achieve a lot of the same benefits just by, focusing on your diet, and also by doing like short intervals of things, as opposed to, blocking out a huge amount of time just to do exercise. So, I mean, I think a lot of us think that more is better, like you were saying, but knowing that you can still achieve a lot of that success through just changing your diet and changing the way you exercise has got to be a relief to a lot of people who don't find another day to do it.
Except the diet part, people don't usually want to look at my experience is that's the hardest part to look at for most people, is what they're eating. But there's no way around that if you're wanting to be healthy. I mean, that's my experience. You're not going to supplement away from it or exercise around it. And the one thing you said, just to talk about cardio a little bit, is a lot of people get focused on the cardiovascular system, the heart, the lungs, the ventricle system, that this is so essential to life, which obviously it is. But the one thing to understand about that is the cardiovascular system is there to serve the muscles, not the other way around. Meaning, the reason why your heart rate goes up when you run is because you're using the muscles in a different way. The reason why when you don't do strength training in a certain way, especially high intensity or high intensity interval training, you're putting high demands on your metabolic and cardiovascular system. That's why it adapts and gets more efficient and effective. You could take drugs to raise your heart rate. It's not going to have any cardiovascular benefit to that. It's only when you include the muscles. So when you find the most efficient and effective way to train your muscles, you're going to find the most efficient and effective way to train your cardiovascular system. The aerobics is dying a hard death, is what I would say. It's been around for a long time. It's been proven to have very little benefit. And the one thing you said that I thought about was calorie burning. So this is something people really get. Well, I do it to burn calories. Well, number one, they usually, and I say, well, you're doing it to lose body fat, then, right? And they usually agree, right? That's why people are doing it. 1 pound of body fat equals 3,500 calories. You'd have to run 35 to 45 miles for 6 to 8 hours to burn 1 pound of body fat. And you could eat those amount of calories in a matter of minutes, depending upon the food.
Yeah.
So the idea that we're trying to burn calories off, number one, why do you have excessive calories on you or excessive energy? Is because you're eating off. You've got to address that. And if you address that, and I mean in a enjoyable way, that's one thing I try. I mean, yeah, it's not as enjoyable as eating Ben and Jerry's. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that we wouldn't prefer to have that.
There are also
a lot of reasons why
Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah. There are actually some good keto ice creams if you want to get into that, but they don't have sugar in them. But the idea, I got off track there. What were we saying? We got off.
Oh, I was just asking.
About calorie burning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea that you have to get your eating in alignment, and it can be enjoyable, and even more important, or as important, is sustainable. So that's where the coaching comes in play, is that I don't try to take people, so let's say like they're extremely over here and then way over here overnight. That's not going to work. And that's the mistake a lot of people make. They try to make these massive shifts in their day and in their schedule, in their exercise, in their eating, and they may produce some results, but it's going to cause so much stress because they're changing so much. It's not going to be sustainable. And that's why the name of my company is Be Happy, Healthy, and Fit, because I don't want to just produce these results and hate the whole journey. Right. Granted, there's going to be challenges, and my program the online program is really a 3-month program to move people from wherever they are in the right direction. And I don't always know the results we're going to produce. I mean, one recent client I had, she started with the 3-month program, and then after the 3-month program decided to continue month to month, just to continue things. Now, she lost 50 pounds in a year, and that's a great rate. It took about 1 pound, 3,500 calories on average per week. Because most people want to lose 10 pounds in a week. Well, number one, I can tell you that's not all body fat. There's no way you burn 35,000 calories of body fat. You probably lost some muscle, which is going to cause you issues later. And it's water. So we want to focus on losing body fat, and at worst case, not losing lean mass, but in most cases, regaining or gaining lean muscle. The metabolism, a lot of people talk about, they think it's a calorie burning thing, right? If you talk about my metabolism's slow or I have a bad metabolism. Metabolism is energy production. Now, obviously, you burn something to create that energy, whether it's sugar you're consuming, fat you're consuming, or fat off of your body. So a lot of the things that I do too are habits to make your metabolism, your insulin levels lower, your blood sugar levels more stabilized, your metabolism more effective at making energy, which is one of the things that happens as we get older, is we start losing energy. And it's because your metabolism is getting beat up from a lot of things, whether it's lack of quality sleep, poor diet, lack of physical activity or the right physical activity, and even breath work, which I didn't get into because I wanted to talk about that, but that's a whole nother conversation. I tried to vomit out as much information as I could in this.
You did a good job. You covered quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, but I'll stop for a moment, see if there's any questions, anything I said so far, or.
Yeah, so maybe you want to talk a little bit about discipline, because I feel like no matter how well you educate people on a healthy diet, healthy exercise regimen, if you're missing that component, it doesn't matter. And that also, in my experience, and we talked about it before we started recording, the discipline element that ensures you stick with a healthy diet and a regular exercise routine also carries over to business and has very positive effects on your performance, with business on a day-to-day basis.
Definitely. So discipline's an interesting one because, well, when I started training 27 years ago and I was, in my 20s, I thought I was just going to give people this information. I had the key and they were just going to go and do it. It's like, they're paying me. Why wouldn't they go do it? I don't understand. I soon realized that that was not the case. And even funny enough, some people will try to work around everything I'm saying every way possible to try to stay with what they're comfortable with. The one thing I like about the word discipline, which tends to have a negative component to it, is I heard this years ago that being disciplined is about being a disciple for yourself. And ultimately, all of these things we're doing are to improve yourself. Now, one aspect of the coaching that tends to help with the discipline aspect is accountability. So one of the issues why I created this program is when I was one-on-one in the gym, we were focusing primarily on exercise in that half an hour, 45 minutes, or an hour session. And I would just lightly dribble out ideas of their diet or their sleep. Rarely did anybody take them on. And that was already shocking me. I'd send them videos or send them articles. And I thought, how are they not taking this stuff on? Maybe because I was ignorant, because I'm so obsessed in this world that I just gravitate towards everything. And over the years, I realized that I had to create a separate time and a separate program. Now, over the years, as online, especially now even more accelerated with this COVID, that people are accepting to getting coaching online or over the phone. And years ago, though, they were not. It was like I would have to schedule a face-to-face, which people didn't want to pay for that. They didn't understand the value, but there's something about the online that's really helped. So that aspect of coaching, I think, was really important, besides for, yes, number one, educating. I don't like people just to do what I say just because I say it. In fact, I promote questions. Why? And I give a lot of information all of which is not taken, but a good bulk of it is. So I believe if you understand why, you're more likely to be consistent when you're challenged. The other is accountability. So I actually use a format called True Coach, where clients have their daily habits on an app on their phone, and they go through them when they check them off when they do them. And I have a dashboard of all my clients day to day. What's the percentage of effectiveness or consistency is going on here?
Mhm.
And some people just that alone, because they like to, I'm assuming they're not just checking off stuff, but they like to have their good number. So I tell them, oh, you're 89%. That's great. But even if someone is low on the percentage scale, it's looking at, this is what's great about this technology that's come out in the last few years, is I can look at what do they consistently miss. So they might be, I tell people, really, you want to be a C or better. 70%, we're not always perfect. Things happen. You're not, in fact, please do not try to be perfect. You're going to drive yourself crazy, but do your best. And what's going to show up is what doesn't seem to consistently happen, whatever it's the afternoon workout, which I prescribe to people because when they start having low energy, because some people go to caffeine, which disrupts their sleep, or they just have a cognitive drop off. There's a little 3-minute routine I have them do, which boosts up nitrous oxide, boosts up cognitive performance, and then maybe a 10-minute meditation. I'll see like that's not happening. So then on our weekly coaching call, we'll have a talk about that. What is happening here? What is the issue here for you? And obviously I've worked with hundreds, thousands of people by now. So I have some idea when they start talking, I can get an idea of what might help them. There's even like a tip I'll have, like for the afternoon routine, which is a tough one, is most people are looking for motivation before they start something, right? They're waiting to be motivated. But motivation usually happens after an activity has started, almost every time. So there's a great, I guess you could call it a trick or hack, where you say, I'm going to use the example of someone running, even though I don't suggest that, but this is a great, simple example. So someone wants to start running, and they say they're going to run 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And they get home and they're like, oh man, I don't want to go. I don't have time. I'm exhausted. So I split the habit up into two things. One is 2 minutes long, and the other is the rest of the habit. So they get credit for one or the other or both. Well, they get credit for the 2 minutes or credit for the whole action. So they get something. So the first 2 minutes is put your workout clothes on, put your shoes on, walk out the door, lock the door behind you. And I always tell them, in this case, it isn't a normal one for me, but I say, you can choose to run or not at that point, or do your exercise. In my case, honestly, it'd be like doing a Tabata routine or something. You don't have to do it. You can check off that first 2 minutes, and you got at least credit for that. So they can always wrap their head around 2 minutes. And it seems like such a, then they just choose not to do it. Rarely do people choose not to do, especially in this case, 4 more minutes. They already dressed. They can't justify not putting their shoes on and their workout clothes on. That's pretty tough. Now, of course, over the years, I've maybe had some people who just don't do it or don't show up, but that's a rare. Most people that are going to reach out to work with a coach have some motivation. They may move at a slower pace than others. It's all relative. My intention isn't to make everybody the same, just to move them in the right direction. In fact, when I even get, I don't know, is that helpful as far as like the tips so far? Or is that being motivated?
Well, I was going to say,
I'm already going off in another tangent. So
no, I was going to say, I think it's kind of relative to, one of my favorite quotes ever is, don't be afraid to suck at something new. Right. Yeah. And it's like, I always apply it to business or, anything dealing with, mostly business oriented stuff. But I think it's also true with exercise. I think a lot of people are scared that they're going to suck at it, in the beginning. And so they don't even want to move into that process because they're like, oh man, I'm only going to be able to run for 5 minutes, Right. And that doesn't seem like it's justifiable. So I'm just not going to do it at all. But, in any area of your life, if you're going to evolve and be the best person you can be, there's always going to be that discomfort, that stage where you're just not an expert at it, and I think that with relation to exercise, a lot of people watching this that are in businesses for themselves or entrepreneurs, they can relate to that discomfort, and apply that to exercise and say, hey, like, this isn't something that I'm going to be great at first, but if I just keep doing it, then eventually I'll become comfortable in it. And that's how you become good at anything.
Yeah. And to
But
add on to that too, like, I don't know if you guys have read the book, The Power of Habit, but I would imagine, Kelly, the hardest part for you is to get your clients to do something the first 3, 4, 5 times. Because once you get in the habit of that, you're exercising, you're eating healthy, and you're starting to feel the benefits of that, it's almost hard then to stop, at least in my experience. Like, I do the cold showers. I've been doing it for a few months. The first few times are horrible. They're like, I'm dancing in the shower like a little baby. But now I can't even imagine like not taking a cold shower. I couldn't imagine not doing that. So I would have to think, and maybe you've had experience with it, just somehow getting your clients to just do it the first 3, 4, 5 times. And then it becomes so much easier to sustain, at least in my experience.
yeah, totally. There's actually a couple things there, like, first what McLean said is that what I hear a lot, I hear this enough that it's funny to me every time when I get a client, or potential client really in this case, who will say, I'm just not in shape enough to work out with you. She's like, that's the whole point. This is the point. You're supposed to be. It's always relative. I mean, I even have, unfortunately she just passed, but I have a couple clients that have Parkinson's, and I have a client who was 4th-stage Parkinson's for 2 years that I worked with. That's a more extreme case. I mean, majority of my clients are somewhere usually 35 and up, and usually 35, 40, and then around 60, 70, because those are 2 hormonal shifts that happen in people, and they're big changes that tend to happen. They're not understanding what's happening. But that and what you said as well, Brandon, is the motion begets motion. So once people get into motion with something, and the case of I know that idea with the cold showers, that after about a minute, you start realizing it's totally comfortable. You just have to get through that first minute. If you don't know it at first, it's going to be like, this is going to be horrible the whole time. But after about a minute, you can sit in that cold water the whole time. So that whole idea of when people, and I coached in a lot of this, is dropping inner resistance. So when you exercise, there's an outer resistance, right? You're moving against something. You're challenging yourself. You're making it uncomfortable, but dropping as quickly as possible your own internal resistance or your own internal dialogue. And that happens as you start getting more consistent. And almost every time, this is why it's 3 months, because it's not going to happen in a month. Yeah. Most people pick up a couple things, they do them consistently, and there's a good bulk of stuff that is not happening. And that's usually the stuff that's going to benefit them the most. And we just keep staying on it, and it starts to happen. And then it's by 3 months, people usually feel pretty solid with the basis of whatever I created with them, for them. Meaning, like I said, that somebody may start out at, I'm just making this number up, 2, and we get them to be a 10. And somebody else may start already at a 10, and we get them to be a 20. It's all relative where they are in their health, wellness, and fitness. But the intention is always to move things forward and in the right direction. And in fact, most goals, I don't even care if it might sound funny, but I even tell them, don't get attached to your goals. Meaning, I want to lose 50 pounds in a year, right? It's just like, I think about corporations, like, let's say in a quarter, they have a sales goal. They want to get to, 80,000. The intention is not necessarily to get to 8,000, it's to increase sales. So if you get to 60,000, it's not going to be like, although individuals their ego may get involved, and I got to get this number. I don't know how fast someone's going to move in the direction of their goal. It depends on their discipline, their commitment, their genetics, which none of us have control over that. But it's just about moving in the right direction, whatever pace that is. Even if you're going 20 miles per hour in the wrong direction, and we start you off going 10 miles per hour in the wrong direction, it's still better. And then ultimately moving in the right direction and building upon that and doing it in a way that's sustainable. Yes, it's going to be challenging, but there's going to be enjoyment in there too, whether it's the satisfaction of producing results or whether it's just, feeling good about yourself and having more energy, losing body fat, getting better blood markers, whatever it might be for you. So that's really the reason why the online coaching has become I love one-on-one training. I've been doing that 27 years. But I know that through the online coaching is where there's a bigger impact on people's lives. That's what I really enjoy the most, whether I'm doing one-on-one, but the coaching seems to have such a big thing, because when I work out in the gym, it's 1% of their whole week I'm with them. Their habits are another 99%, and that's where they're making huge strides.
So
I have a million other topics, so I'll shut up.
I was gonna say we're kind of running out of time, but I did want you to touch base because of our audience. I would love for you to talk about how diet and exercise pertains to cognitive, strength and recognition, and just cognitive abilities in general. Because I think a lot of the people watching, it's really important to be able to not have, like, I talk to so many people that have like brain fog all the time. Like this morning, I was talking to, a pretty well-known person in the Amazon community, and he's talking about, oh, I have brain fog, and, I don't know how to handle that. And, I don't know whether he works out or not. I don't know what his diet's like, but I definitely think everyone can relate to, you're just not being sharp and focused and stuff. So I'd love for you to touch base on that.
Okay, so I'll graze a couple things and try not to go into much detail about them because there's a lot there. But, well, first off, when I talk about these micro routines, these high intensity interval training, one aspect that would positively affect your cognition is that when you do this brief intense activity, you increase something called BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's a precursor to developing new brain cells and also new what's the word I'm looking for? Patterns. So you want to create these neurological patterns, right? And you want kind of like, I'm trying to do it fast, but like the idea of teaching an old dog new tricks, you increase neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to adapt, but also increasing actual brain cells. You also increase BDNF through fasting. So I didn't get into it, but I'm a big proponent of fasting, not necessarily 5-day water fast, but most people, I can encourage them to do a weekly 24-hour fast. Most people think they cannot do that, but they're shocked when they actually do it, and the energy levels they have while they're fasting and the cognition, the sharpness they have. That's another way to increase BDNF, which is a brain neurotransmitter. It's a way to develop more brain cells and quicker responses in the brain. Also, obviously, if you were more carbohydrate dependent, meaning more American standard diet, you'll have up and down blood sugar. That will cause ups and downs with brain fog. So like when you go into a low, that's when you think you need to eat, right? And then or you think you need caffeine. Another way to look at it is also sleep. So a lot of people are dependent on caffeine because their quality of sleep is so low and they wake up so groggy and can't get moving. That's not natural. But there's a lot of tips I can give around sleep, and that's one of the bigger areas. In fact, I even encourage a lot of my clients to get what's called an Oura ring, which I really recommend. OURA, Oura ring. It's one of the best sleep trackers. A lot of these wrist wearables like Apple Watch, Fitbit, people use them, but they're not really good at really tracking quality sleep. They're more or less tracking motion. Mm-hmm. They're not, I can go off on the Oura, but just research the Oura ring if you're really interested. I think it's maybe like a $250 product. It's worth it. It's the best sleep tracker out there. And you can start to make changes in your habits and in your diet. You can see how it impacts your quality of deep sleep. And something, HRV is another thing to look up, heart rate variability. These are factors that would affect your cognition the next day, because everybody has experienced like an all-nighter, and then the next day they're useless mentally. There's just fog. But people don't understand that sleeping 5-6 hours a night is creating small levels of that all the time. And primarily because in deep sleep, you are dumping out neurotoxic chemicals from the day before. So just using the brain alone as a byproduct of toxins, which is totally natural and fine. When you sleep, the brain in deep sleep primarily dumps these out. So if you're not getting quality deep sleep, you're just accumulating brain toxins, and it's causing damage for sure. Definitely, this is why like it's associated with lower levels of deep sleep are associated with higher rates of dementia and other Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, all these. Alcohol can be contributed to lack of sleep as well. If you drink close to sleep, no good. It's gonna destroy quality of sleep. There's many things with sleep. What I might do, if you don't mind, real quick, is just give people 2 books that they might, you know, if I never see or hear from them again, that they might be able to utilize for sleep. And there's even a breath one, but the main one for sleep is Matthew Walker. It's a pretty popular one now, Why We Sleep. That's a great book to get. You can get it on Amazon. It's a great, he goes into all these aspects of sleep, light exposure, all these things that are becoming a little bit more popular, but in a little bit better view. And about breath, which I didn't get to talk about, there's a new book by James Nestor, The New Science of a Lost Art. I didn't get to touch into breathing, but it's something we do 25,000 times a day. It might be important that we do it effectively in all the areas it affects, whether it's sleep, and I still want to dribble out more. Okay. That was it.
We'll have you come back and just talk about breathing. How about that?
There you go. That'd be great.
Bad breath, right?
Yeah.
Good breath. Good breath. You want good breath.
This is so funny. Brendan, did you have any other questions for Kelly?
No, it's a really interesting subjects. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
you're awesome. If people want to be able to get a hold of you, Kelly, or contact you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I would say my website, but with my marketing guy, I never know what's going out on my website because we're evolving it a lot now because of the coaching. Obviously, easiest way, phone number or email. Phone number is 954-709-4769. Or my email, which is Kelly, Kelly, at be-happyhealthyfit.com.
And I'll make sure to put your information, and when we go to publish this, I'll make sure to put your information.
And I also, just to let people know, is that I offer a free consultation and no cost for it. It's more information gathering for both of us to see if there's any opportunity to work together or not. No pressure sales. I'm very much just about giving information and move forward from there if not.
Awesome. Right
All right.
Thank you so much. Again,
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Yeah. And Brendan Fields with Rebate and McClaymore with Liaison Marketing. And yeah, it was awesome seeing you guys. And make sure to stay healthy and fit, everyone.
And happy.
That's my advice. And happy. And you know, make sure your breath smells good in the morning. That's probably
That's right.
good.
There you go.
All right. Bye.
Bye.